Breaking news as Chris Klieman is out at Kansas State. He's set to retire. Collin Klein rumored to return.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rao, and thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day, now part of the number one sports podcast network, the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com. Place your NFL live bets all season long. We are diving into breaking news, folks. This is insane. Never thought we were going to get to this point, especially on National Early Signing Day. But here we are. It was reported by the Mercury News first. Happened just a few hours ago. Sources have told the Mercury that Chris Klieman's retirement was set to be announced sometime this week. Collin Klein has been lined up to replace him. Then the news got really, really fast. Pete Thamel of ESPN reported the exact same thing, that it was going to be happening a lot quickly than just sometime this week. It was breaking news. Chris Klieman's considering stepping down at Kansas State. Nothing was finalized, according to Pete Thamel, but the sides are in discussions. He's under contract through the 2032 season. And as we mentioned, that Mercury News was the first to report the potential retirement. Collin Klein is set to be the next coach, and that is huge. There's no need for a coaching search. It's just kind of filling the shoes of the next Kansas State head coach, if this is exactly what's happening. Now, the press conference that was scheduled for 11 a.m. For normally the early signing day has been moved to 4 p.m., and we will be discussing the reaction to that afterwards. Want to get a reaction show out now before that. But what we've heard is the press conference that was originally scheduled for 11 a.m. has been moved to 4 p.m. Taylor Barrett, who is in charge of recruiting, will go first and talk about the signees. Chris Klieman is not scheduled to talk about the signees. And then Klieman and athletic director Gene Taylor will address the media. That has been moved to 4 p.m. Central. This sounds like it's all but done. It also sounds like this is something that they didn't want to get out. This is something they probably wanted to wait and maybe report this later on. But there was some smoke last night on social media, and I'm going to be honest with you, it didn't feel like it was anything extra than what has been kind of happening over the last couple weeks. People dropping some hints about Collin Klein. It kind of just felt like people were just wishing yet again. You didn't really feel the same, the smoke that was actually happening. I thought it was just something, okay, time to go to sleep. That's exactly what it felt like. It didn't feel like anything crazy. Then you wake up this morning, and you see that Chris Klieman is set to retire and Collin Klein is set to replace him. There's a lot of things that I want to get to. There's a lot of things we're going to discuss. This will not just be the only show we talk about this, that's for sure. But obviously the biggest things that come to my mind right off the bat is, one, crazy that it happens on National Early Signing Day. From what we've seen so far, nothing is really impacting that, the decisions from some of these folks. We haven't seen anything on flips in the wrong direction. We have seen them happen in the last couple of days. We've talked about that on this show, but nothing happening in this direction as of right now. We're going to dive deep into all of the signees. That was the plan for today. That might just get shifted a little bit to the right, maybe tomorrow or later on this evening, talking about those because of this breaking news dropping here. And we have to discuss it on Locked On Kansas State. The first thing was that. Then next was, what does that mean for the future of some of these players? My immediately thought process went to, does Avery Johnson want to stick around with Collin Klein? And we've kind of talked about that in the past. I mean, that's a match made in heaven, you'd think. So that makes you feel a little better, you would hope. Obviously, you think that there's going to be some brand new coordinators. I've heard from an inside report that Matt Wells does not know where he stands. So that's something interesting as well. Of course, I'm assuming that if Collin Klein comes, he brings his own staff with him. Returning player is great. A returning player is fantastic, especially with the type of love that Collin Klein has for this university and how much the fans actually love him. I see comments starting to come in. Thank you so much. Drop your comments and questions. We'll get to them in this show today. We are live on Locked On Kansas State. It's a really exciting time, I think, for this one. I really do think that this is a really exciting time for Kansas State. And I think this also makes, and this kind of goes back to what we talked about for a long time on this show, getting to that 6th win was way more important now than it was 3 days ago, because now you have the opportunity to send Chris Klieman off on a great note. Yeah, you won against Colorado at home in Manhattan, which is going to eventually be his last game in Manhattan, which you kind of hoped in hindsight you knew about that, so you could have had a nice farewell, a nice send-off for Chris Klieman. But there's a report that, and again, we're going to find more about at the actual press conference, but there's a report that Chris Klieman will coach the bowl game for Kansas State, and Collin Klein will stay at Texas A&M to coach the team as he's the offensive coordinator for the Aggies in the college football playoff. Go figure, an SEC coach actually sticking around for the college football playoffs, right? That just shows how much more respect that Collin Klein has, your new head coach for Kansas State, compared to, dare I say, a Lane Kiffin. I love that. Absolutely love that already. Throwing shade already as much as we can at the SEC. I'm excited for this one. I wonder if the bowl game maybe you get a jump up. Maybe you get a little bit better of a bowl game knowing it's Chris Klieman's last game. That's something that I've kept in mind and thought about. But overall, I think he's had a lot of criticism this year. Chris Klieman has. And I'm not saying that none of it or any of it was deserved, because there was definitely some times this year where he fell behind. And you've definitely gave criticism to him and his coordinators, and myself included. And I really do think that that's a big reason why he's deciding to step down. In this new world of NIL, in this new world of transfer portal, you have to have this high energy. You have to have high energy to be able to keep up with this. And we've seen some of these legendary coaches, and now you can put Chris Klieman in this category. And I wouldn't, bat an eye for 1 second, where they have found that it's just not the same thing for them. They want to be able to coach one way, and you can't do that if there's all this money and agents and things on the line. And I think that is exhausting for some of these coaches who have been around the industry for 20, 30 years, and now having to, reinvent the wheel again. Going from the rotary phone to the iPhone is just something that's very tough. We've seen it happen with Nick Saban. We've seen it happen with the Syracuse coach in basketball. We've seen it happen with so many different legendary coaches. And I think that's what we're getting right now with Chris Klieman as well. A lot of things to discuss here. Instant reaction, of course. I want to give my flowers to Chris Klieman, and then we're going to talk about Collin Klein. In case you don't know who he is, I'm guessing you do, but in case you live under a rock, we're going to talk about that next, right here on this live reaction show of Chris Klieman retiring and Collin Klein coming in as the new head coach of Kansas State. But first, this episode of Locked On Kansas State is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL Sundays move fast. One big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what making live bets with FanDuel so exciting. You are not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum, every swing, every highlight moment, you name it. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump in to every moment. With live spreads, money lines, adjust instantly. You got those SGPs, those good old same game parlays, you name it. FanDuel has it for you. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com. Place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Wow. I mean, this is wild. I woke up to this. Obviously, full transparency. If you've been in every day on this show, you know that I live out on the West Coast. I woke up to this. I had a huge group text from the Big 12 squad, from all our folks saying, wake up. It's time to go live. So very exciting stuff that Chris Klieman is retiring, and Collin Klein is set to be the new head coach at Kansas State football. Again, the press conference set for 4 p.m. Central. We will have a live reaction show about what happens for that right after that as well. There's just so much to unpack in this one. Got a little couple comments coming in. The Shoe Happen says, the return of Optimus. I love it. Optimus Klein. Love that for sure. Someone said, I know I just commented, but Avery Johnson almost left with Collin, and Lincoln stays. I think we're going to get to that in a minute. I really think that's an interesting question, interesting comment for sure, especially the Avery Johnson thing. And this coaching move almost feels like design. Do you think this move was premeditated when Klein left for A&M, go get some big boy experience in SEC and bring him home? Ooh, great question. Let's start with that one. I don't think it was premeditated. I don't. As much as I would love to say that it was premeditated, I don't think so. I think Collin Klein wanted the head coaching job a few years ago. And the fact that Chris Klieman was in a really good spot winning the Big 12 championship. I don't know if Collin Klein saw a path for him as early as what right now would be. So he went to go to a different spot. And dare you say, going from Big 12 offensive coordinator to SEC offensive coordinator is a small improvement. It's a small step up in the right direction when you're trying to make that next step as a head coach. Collin Klein's name was all around, swirling around everywhere for potential head coaching jobs. Oklahoma State, his name was swirling around everywhere. Boosters were very close to wanting to bring in Collin Klein from Oklahoma State. Heard that from inside sources. And then a recent development, just hours before this news came out, was that Collin Klein was in the running for being the head coach for USF. So the fact that he did not take that job, Brian Hartline from Ohio State was just offered that one as well. Makes you wonder if he declined it, and maybe that's why Kansas State jumped on it. You don't know. Maybe that's a thing. There's a lot of things that still unpack. Maybe, just maybe, this is a speculation thing, of course. This is not reporting. Maybe USF tried to hire Collin Klein, and he reached out to Kansas State and said, I'm about to take this job unless you offer me a job at Kansas State. That's something to keep in mind. We'll see what more unfolds when this press conference and obviously all the news drops in just a minute. I don't think anything was premeditated about this. I think this was a heat of the moment decision. I think this was something that they didn't want to get out right away. I don't think they scheduled Chris Klieman to want to say he's going to retire the same day that they're trying to sign the 2026 class. I don't think anything about this was premeditated, whether you talk about it from years past, Gene Taylor trying to play chess or, finding a good replacement. I don't see that happening. There is some rumors that Gene Taylor also will be retiring. From what I am hearing, that is not true. Gene Taylor will remain as the athletic director at Kansas State. That comes a little bit of a shock to me. I thought that Collin Klein would never return with Gene Taylor as athletic director, not because there were severed ties, but just because of age and the relationship that Gene Taylor has with Chris Klieman. I thought that just would be a kind of twofold thing. Once Klieman left, Taylor left, and then you'd bring in a new regime. So I'm a little surprised there. I think that could be a good thing. We'll see what happens in the future on that one. But I want to give some flowers to Chris Klieman here. He coached this team very well, obviously winning a Big 12 championship in 2022. That was his best season, going 10-4, 7-2 in the conference that year. They did lose the Sugar Bowl that season, but again, it was a great year for Chris Klieman. Overall, he's going to finish with a 54-34 record at Kansas State, 36-27 in conference. The 6-6 season was his worst year other than the COVID year in 2020 when he went 4-6. But man, what a great year for Chris Klieman. What a great career for Chris Klieman at Kansas State. With the exception of 2020, which there wasn't bowl games anyways, he's going to, every year that he went to Kansas State, he made it to a bowl game. Lost in the Liberty Bowl in 2019, won the Texas Bowl in 2021. As we mentioned earlier, lost that Sugar Bowl in 2022, and won the Pop-Tarts Bowl in 2023. And last year, that crazy win against Rutgers in the Rape Bowl last season. This year, we'll see what happens, where that bowl game goes. I'm excited to see maybe he gets to step up. Maybe it's not just the Liberty Bowl. Maybe it's a return to the Rape Bowl or something like that. Obviously, being 6-6, you don't have much of room to discuss on that. But there's still one more game to say farewell to Chris Klieman. I kind of hope it's as local as possible so Kansas State fans can travel. Although Kansas State fans travel very well regardless, it'll be really nice to see one last farewell for Chris Klieman. And I think that might mean that more players, even if they decide to hit the portal, if they have love for Chris Klieman, this also means maybe some seniors, some that are even planning to enter the NFL draft, won't opt out. They'll play one more game for Chris Klieman. So I think this bowl game means a lot more for this program after, having Chris Klieman around for 7 very good seasons. And again, the expectation was this team to be a 10-2 football team, a 9-3 football team. You get the 6-6 and you decide it's time to move on. So if this is the worst it gets, folks, then you're in really good hands. You're in very good hands. The worst you get is still a bowl game. Try telling that to Kansas. Try telling that to Oklahoma State. Some of these older, Oklahoma State is seen as a great team inside the Big 12 conference for years, right? They're not even close. They're not even sniffing a bowl game. They were out of bowl contention after week 6. The fact that your worst season is a 6-6 record is great. And I think you just really start off, you continue the ball rolling. Yesterday's episode, again, I thought this was all smoke. Yesterday's episode, I went off on a rant. If you're an everydayer and you heard it, I went off a rant and asked where the momentum is. Where is the momentum for this program? Not just the football team, the basketball team, you name it, everything. The university. I think with this Collin Klein hire, you just started the spark. You just got the kindling wood. You just got one of those logs you buy from the store that you set it on fire and it stays on fire for like 4 hours, and then you can put everything on top of it. You know what I'm talking about for those fireplaces? That's what you got with Collin Klein. You just got that spark for the right direction for momentum. And if you don't lose anybody huge in this early signing day window after making a head coaching change the day of, and obviously not having a head coaching search helps when you're basically just changing the guards. Obviously that doesn't, no speculation, no worry, concerns about the program. It's like he's out, he's in, we know what we're doing. That helps a lot. Don't get me wrong. But if you don't lose anybody, that's a great feeling. And you're going to miss some players. Some people are going to leave in the portal, but this changes the entire aspect of the transfer portal in my mind. What does that mean for the transfer portal? Last year, they focused very, very hard on the retention model, where they wanted to bring people back. And they focused on guys like Avery Johnson, Jace Brown, Dylan Edwards. They focused on those players to return after being a great team in the beginning of 2024. You start off the season 7-1. You finish 9-4. After the bowl win to Rutgers. You didn't have much momentum, but the retention model saying, hey, we had something working for us in 2024, but then it just fell off. We can get back to there. You didn't have any of that motivation going into this offseason after finishing 6-6, after losing in Dublin, after losing to Army. Now that you've brought Collin Klein in, former quarterback for Kansas State, former offensive coordinator for an SEC team, and of course for Kansas State in the college football playoffs, obviously has some great recruiting ties to the area, and then his SEC knowledge obviously doesn't hurt at all. You're probably going to get some players that leave and transfer from Texas Tech, especially on the offensive side, head into Kansas State. A lot of stuff to cover there. We're going to get into some Texas A&M type on this show. And then, of course, what his new staff brings, that is natural momentum. So we found it. We've absolutely found that momentum right here. Bring in more of your questions. I really like this, your comments and questions. Collin Klein, really, really fun addition to this Kansas State staff. Let's talk a little bit more here. There's just so much more to talk about. Let's just finish up this show as we get this live reaction of Chris Klieman retiring and Collin Klein being the head coach at Kansas State. Avery Johnson and Collin Klein, that sounds fun. That sounds really fun. I really like that idea. We've talked about that in the past, where if those two were hand in hand, how would this offense look? Would they be more explosive? Texas A&M's had some really good offense this year. They've scored multiple points. I think they won against Notre Dame 41-40. So they can put up good numbers against good teams. They're obviously 11-1. They've only lost one game on the season. It was last week to Texas. Right now, they're currently sitting as the 7th seed in the latest college football playoff rankings. Collin Klein has a lot to do with that. Collin Klein, obviously no stranger to Kansas State. He played for Kansas State from 2008 to 2012, and then came back to coach as a graduate assistant from 2014 to 2015. Left for a season to Northern Iowa as the quarterback coach, and then returned right back to Kansas State. Quarterback coach in 2017, was the co-offensive coordinator and quarterback coach in 2018, stepped back down to the quarterback coach in 2019 to 2021 when Chris Klieman arrived. And then in 2022 to 2023, he was back to the OC/QB coach, and then headed out to Texas A&M last season and this year as the OC/quarterback coach. Now he will be the head coach at Kansas State. Exciting stuff. Very exciting stuff. If anybody's got any comments or questions, drop it in here. I think the biggest thing that we need to pay attention to now is what I want to hear in the press conference is just transparency. I'd like to see what Chris Klieman really has to say. And he's one that is not afraid to be transparent. I think we're going to hear that they didn't want this to come out, that they didn't want this to drop. He's probably going to talk about the actual decision, why he retired, why he's deciding to step down now. I bet he talks about the fact that it had a lot to do with NIL and transfer portal and the way that it's different to coach kids. I'm sure that's something that's going to be discussed. I want to hear what Gene Taylor has to say about the transition. I'm guessing that it's going to be very focused on Chris Klieman, and they might not even discuss Collin Klein's name at all. I'm sure that that'll be a conversation that comes up in the media scrum if it's not from the actual statement from Gene Taylor. I think you have to bring it up one way or another, but I think they're going to be very heavy on giving Chris Klieman the love and support that he deserves. And I think that's absolutely fair, but I think you do have to be ready to answer questions because this is something that happened so sudden. This is something that, other than the social media smoke, no one was actually expecting. And although it is going to be exciting, and although it's going to potentially most likely be the right move for the future of Kansas State athletics, there's still a lot of things swirling and a lot of questions that are going to be happening for this program for some time. The transfer portal is about a month away. The fact that you are already set up to just not search for a coach, but just move on for a new coach, you still have to find and build your support staff. You still have to build those relationships back up with other players. You have to talk to every player that could be thinking about leaving the transfer portal. There's a lot of things that still have to happen for this new regime. The only thing that doesn't have to happen is you have to look for a new coach. We're seeing that happen with multiple other big schools. Penn State was one of the first schools to fire a coach this year, and they're still, twiddling their thumbs. We're seeing it happen with BYU, who almost lost their coach. There's a lot of things that are swirling around. Obviously, the Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin, LSU stuff was crazy as well. You don't have to have that drama. The LSU Ole Miss drama, if that happened at Kansas State, I don't think we're built for that. So I'm very glad that it was a you're out, you're in kind of situation. Because everybody knew who you wanted the next coach to be. People didn't want to lose the opportunity to get Collin Klein because of the fact that Chris Klieman might have stayed. And that's not shade on Chris Klieman because he's been a very successful coach, but the writing has been on the wall about how the future needs to go in a different direction for Kansas State. Kansas State was falling behind. Chris Klieman discussed it in a last press conference, how donors, how NIL, how money is setting behind. I wonder if these donors stepped up and said, I think we need to make a change. We need to bring back, as someone mentioned in the comments, Optimus Klein. A lot of stuff to talk about on this show moving forward. This will not be the only time we go live today. We're going to have a reaction show after the press conference. Be sure to tune in to Locked On Kansas State. If you're listening in audio, it'll be right in the audio feed as soon as we go live on YouTube. Please like the video. Please subscribe. We're going to be back here very soon, and we're going to talk National Signing Day too. Crazy day for the channel, folks. Crazy day for Kansas State University, and we'll have you covered as we always do. So please like the video. Please subscribe. We'll see you back here next time, right here on Locked On Kansas State.